All right, welcome to the Young Turks. I fear we're going to have an excellent show tonight.
Yes.
Okay, we're in a good mood. Everything's good. We got an extremely stable genius as president. Everybody's having fun. So he's back at it. We're going to get to that in a little bit. Today we were supposed to have Ron Perlman on the third hour. He had something come up. He's going to come on a little bit later. So a couple of weeks or so from now. But I wanted to tell you super cool guests that are coming up next week. Next Thursday, Jordan Klepper from Comedy Central. So that's kind of awesome. I was on his show. Were you on his show too or no? I forget.
No, I was not.
Okay, so I was.
He's banned. He's actually not going to come on. I'm kidding.
So Klepper's coming on next week. And so is another presidential candidate, John Delaney. He'll be our 11th presidential candidate on. I've lost count, it might be 12, but anyways.
That is quite a pose for the photo.
I know, right? That hand motion could mean a lot of things. I don't know if he's flashing gang signs from Maryland, but anyways. And then Kamala Harris, well, town hall, we're gonna cover the town hall. That's next Tuesday. So John Delaney's Friday, Klepper's Thursday, and on Tuesday we're gonna cover Kamala Harris's town hall. So everybody check all that stuff out, fun for everybody. But we have a devolving situation with the president we want to let you know about now.
Yes, we do, we do.
Oh, by the way, sorry, next segment, more exciting news about the rally, okay? You're gonna, okay, go.
All right, give me 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, I'm ready.
We got a new speaker, by the way. So I'm gonna tell you in the next segment, okay?
A new speaker?
At the speech in Iowa.
Got it, okay. Democratic leadership has been expressing thoughts and prayers for Donald Trump and his administration following his juvenile meltdown in what was supposed to be an infrastructure meeting yesterday. Here's Nancy Pelosi.
I truly believe that the president has a bag of tricks and the White House has a bag of tricks that they save for certain occasions. They don't necessarily apply to the occasion, but they're a distraction, which is his master of distraction. We will all agree on that. That's something he does well, to distract from problems that he has. He tries to change the subject. And while he tried to say it's because I said cover up, we've been saying cover up for a while. And our 9 o'clock meeting was a meeting we have anyway, so it had nothing to do with him. But I think what really got to him was these court cases and the fact that the House Democratic Caucus is not on a path to impeachment. And that's where he wants us to be.
Okay, can I jump in for a second, Anna?
Sure.
Yeah, so look, yesterday I gave her a lot of credit and saying she really played Trump well, and she did. She got under his skin in just the right way. And so here, I think that I don't agree that it was a strategy by Trump to do a distraction. I'll get to why in a second. But she was doing fine. She's still goading him. I still like it. We don't have a bias against anybody. If you're doing great stuff, great. You're getting under Trump's skin. Love it. Keep going, right? But when she turned and said, "Oh, he doesn't want us to do impeachment, and that's why he was upset because we're not doing impeachment." No, that's totally made up. That's for Nancy Pelosi's agenda, has nothing to do with Donald Trump. And every indication is that Donald Trump does not want to be impeached. And so this idea that Trump is mad that he's not being impeached, it's preposterous.
I mean, look, I think you're right, but there's also a little bit of a twist because I mean, Republicans are absolutely convinced and Democratic leadership is absolutely convinced that pursuing impeachment would be political suicide for Democrats. Now, we disagree with that perspective. We think that impeachment makes sense. And let me be clear, there's a possibility that it could hurt Democrats politically. I don't know for sure, but what I do know is that what's more important for me and what's more important for the country is that you ensure that the president and the executive branch doesn't get to be above the law, right? So you set a harmful precedent by not pursuing impeachment if the Trump administration is brazenly breaking the rules, breaking the law. You get the picture. But anyway, I mean, who knows? It could be possible the Trump administration is hoping that they pursue impeachment because it could harm them politically.
No way, no way, no way, no way. So in the court hearings in New York regarding Deutsche Bank and his records from there, Trump lost that hearing. Nancy Pelosi also mentioned that, and she said that's what's driving him crazy. She's totally right about that. And inside the courtroom, apparently, freelance reporters said that there was talk of connecting the Trump and Kushner money to the Russian money laundering that Deutsche Bank did. Okay, so that's what's having him go ballistic. And if you go towards impeachment, more of that stuff is likely to come out. There's the one thing Donald Trump doesn't want under any and all circumstances is for that financial information to come out. So impeachment would make that more likely, not less likely. So Trump, the idea that Trump is sitting there, oh man, I hope they impeach me, and then maybe all my financial records will be all over television. That'll be great.
Well, remember,
you must be crazy to think that.
Well, remember, at this point, in 2 separate cases, federal judges have ruled that Deutsche Bank absolutely must comply with the congressional subpoena to release those financial records. So we're gonna see those financial records anyway. But nonetheless, I wanna go to the next video because that might change your mind a little bit on how Pelosi is playing this. Let's take a look.
The president again stormed out. I think, what? First, pound the table, walk out the door. What? Next time, have the TV cameras in there while I have my say. That didn't work for him either. And now this time, another temper tantrum. Again, I pray for the President of the United States. I wish that his family or his administration or his staff would have an intervention for the good of the country.
So every time Pelosi says, I pray for the President of the United States, heads explode, right? In the Trump administration, Donald Trump doesn't like it, his sons don't like it, and Trump tweeted, quote, Nancy, thank you so much for your prayers. I know you truly mean it.
Totally getting it under his skin. And on that, Pelosi, wonderful job, wonderful job. Every time we had this discussion yesterday, I was.
You were right. You were right. You were right. Yes.
Okay. When she says I pray for the president, that is wonderfully demeaning and patronizing. Okay.
You're right.
And I'm going to add one other thing she did that was great. So look, anyone who calls us biased is nuts. We just judge the actions and the policies on their own. So under their theory, we don't like Pelosi. Why? I don't know. What did she never kicked my cat, right? So here she did something else great.
Has she kicked someone's cat?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying it's not personal. The things I don't like is because when she does the wrong things, not because I don't like her. So Trump leaves, and then Pelosi does a mini speech. This is inside what was supposed to be the get together to talk about infrastructure. And then Kellyanne Conway said that.
I have that.
Oh, you have it?
Stop
Okay.
stepping on my lines,
Sorry,
Uygur.
I love it. I just get so excited about it. And then I'm going to go back to something that Pelosi said that I didn't agree with. Go ahead.
All right, so let's skip ahead a little bit and go to what Cenk was referencing because I enjoyed that as well. So let's go to graphic 6. Conway asked Pelosi whether she had a response for the president. Pelosi replied that she would reply to the president, not staff.
No, that's the part I love.
Yeah.
Like Conway's trying to engage her, and Pelosi's like, I don't talk to staff.
Oh, but it gets better. It gets better. As people got up to leave, Conway said to Pelosi, "That's really pro-woman of you." Oh, I love it. More of that. It's so good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But like, Nancy Pelosi's not pro-women enough. Nancy Pelosi's a lot of things, but say she's not pro-women enough because she didn't
want to talk to you.
She didn't want to talk to a Trump underling. Okay, minion is not good evidence of Pelosi not being pro-women. Please, Kellyanne, get yourself elected president, and then she'll have a conversation with you.
Now, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy responded to Pelosi's press conference by having a press conference of his own, and here's what he has to say as Donald Trump's lackey.
If we're serious about solving problems, I think the actions of the speaker were irresponsible. You've had on scheduled for a number of weeks to have a follow-up meeting with the president. to talk about infrastructure, to actually come to a solution. But what do you do right before the meeting? You schedule a special conference of the majority to talk about impeachment. You walk out to the microphones before and you claim the president is covering something up. And that same day, the Speaker questioned all Republicans' oath to the Constitution. This is irresponsible. This is not a way to govern.
Here's what's irresponsible. There was one person who had a temper tantrum and ran out of that room when there needed to be an incredibly important discussion about infrastructure. Instead of being a leader, instead of being strong, Donald Trump decided to allow someone to get under his skin and he stormed out of that room. And then he had a press conference where he had ill-prepared notes that were misspelled, by the way. And that's a new story, right? He's misspelled accomplishments, but whatever. That is the irresponsible behavior. The person who on a regular basis, it's become the norm now, and it shouldn't be the norm. He cannot contain himself, he cannot compose himself, he cannot control his own emotions. And that is not healthy for someone who's supposed to lead the country.
So what Kevin McCarthy left out of there as context is of course very important, which is that they had to have that meeting about whether to pursue impeachment or not, because there was a rebellion within Democratic ranks saying, why won't Pelosi impeach? This is crazy, let's go, we gotta do impeachment. And that meeting was for Nancy Pelosi to quell that rebellion one more time. So the meeting was actually Pelosi being pro-Trump. She went to the meeting and said, I don't want to impeach Trump, and so stop it. So afterwards, as a compromise, she came out and said in the presser, look, we're not pursuing impeachment, but the president's obviously doing a cover-up, which is clear to everyone, right? He said in his own press conference after the meeting, Trump said that he was the most transparent president in American history. Hilarious. He's blocking literally 20 different investigations right now. They're requesting simple records, some about Trump and some about just regular government work. And he's blocking every congressional request. He's the least transparent president in history. And Nancy Pelosi up until now has largely been protecting him. And it was, as one of our viewers wrote in a tweet in the middle of the show, wasn't the resistance anymore, it was the assistance.
Yes.
So over the last day and a half, she's done a decent job of getting under his skin. I'm trying to compliment her for that. But McCarthy's total nonsense about how Pelosi is the one who's causing all this. Of course it's Trump. And in fact, I want to come back to one thing I didn't agree with on Pelosi. She said that Trump is master of distraction and he's trying to distract us from the infrastructure bill because he's not prepared. No, not remotely buying it. So number one, Trump is never prepared. That's never stopped him before. Remember, he said he went into negotiations with North Korea. He said he didn't need to know anything about North Korea because he would know within 1 second of walking into the room if they were going to have a deal.
He specifically said he didn't need to prepare because of his touch, his feel.
And then later declared his love for Kim Jong-un. This is all true. Now, so when you look into the details, it turns out, well, there's no good way of saying this other than I was right. So yesterday I said, no, the guy never has a strategy, never, ever, ever. So one thing that led people to believe that he might have planned the walkout as a distraction, etc., was that he already had a sign prepared when he went to the Rose Garden about no obstruction, no collusion. It turns out the White House said, no, we had this sign prepared for weeks for another reason, and then we brought it out here for the Rose Garden. And now staffers, this is not a good leak in favor of Donald Trump, have leaked. Yeah, no, when he heard Pelosi saying that it was a cover-up, he was, quote, livid. So, and you can see it in his tweets. Every tweet in the morning, he's like, ah! The guy doesn't have any strategy. He heard cover-up. He walked into a meeting he was supposed to have. He said, I can't believe this. He said something mean about me. I'm gonna take my ball and go home. That's all he ever does is cry. That's not a strategy.
Okay, I have to ask a question though. So look, we talked about this yesterday. We believe that Pelosi had her strategy of doing that press conference, saying that Trump has a cover up right before she's about to have a meeting with Trump, knowing that Trump is gonna have a temper tantrum, and he did, he fell into that trap. But we also know that Trump was preparing that Rose Garden press conference, right? We know that he had that sign ready.
No, I'm saying now it turns out he was not necessarily prepared.
Not. Okay.
And in fact, the sign was ready weeks beforehand, and they brought it out for this instance. And then on top of that, one last data point on that, so you know who's right and who's wrong in terms of Pelosi, et cetera, is that they called a press conference right before the meeting,
right.
And before the Pelosi-Trump meeting. And remember, Trump was 15 minutes late to the meeting, and he has all those handwritten notes with all the misspellings, et cetera. So Sarah Huckabee Sanders, right before going to the meeting, said, hey, press, we're gonna have a press conference at 11:20, okay? And so it appears that all of that stuff was done on the spot because the president was mad.
Yeah, okay, so that makes a lot more sense. And maybe that is a good excuse for how accomplishments was spelled. It was spelled ACHOMLISHMENTS.
Oh, no, that's, no, accomplishments, that's a different word. It's, that accomplishments is in the dictionary.
Best words.
It's in the dictionary right next to covfefe.
That's the president of the United States, everybody. All right, you know what, we're gonna take a break. When we come back, we have more news for you, including a rather explosive story by TYT Investigates involving a death in South Bend, Indiana.
We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you wanna get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment. All right, back on the Young Turks. Let's read comments first, members' comments first. Among those, Maylee D says, I love Anna's shirt. It always gets me inspired to get back to working on my house.
Nice.
Is that the kind of, is that a thing that people on air wear shirts that inspire people to go to work?
I don't know. Okay. I don't know, but I like this shirt too. It's my lumberjack shirt.
Yeah, we know. Yeah. It most certainly is.
It means I'm ready for business.
Interesting. Okay. Brittyness91 says, watching TYT live finally, because at work I never catch it live now because I'm on medical leave. Catching TYT on Pluto TV. So that's awesome. I love that you're doing that. It's behind by a minute and a half from the stream on the TYT website, but it's still cool to catch you guys live. And I love that you're doing that. We're on Pluto, Roku, Zumo, YouTube TV. We're on all of those. And a lot of that is built into your TVs. You can get it online, et cetera. And the 24-hour channel, nonstop TYT network, different shows like No Filter, Damage Report, interviews, Old School, et cetera. So check that out. And of course, if you're a member, you can get all of it, and you know that. So anytime you want. Hangry Skywalker on Twitter says, no wonder Donald Trump hates women. He keeps getting scorched by them. I like that. And finally, Mrs. Data says, he's 15 minutes late for work, even though he works at home. That's also an excellent point I had not considered.
Thought you would totally do the same thing, by the way.
Me? Yeah.
100%.
No, but that's because I'd be in 2 other meetings. So anyways, all right, one more fun announcement for you guys. The rally I'm doing in Iowa, oh no, here comes JD Scholten. So another speaker's been added. JD came within 3 points of beating the worst congressman in America, Steve King. He's from Iowa, nearly won that seat. We're gonna see Steve King again, very likely, and unless he loses in a Republican primary. So that might be your next congressman from that district in Iowa. And he's gonna join us at the rally in Des Moines on June 8th. You can sign up for that at tyt.com/rally. We now have myself, Allison Hartson, Richard Ojeda, and JD Scholten all going. That is a badass crew. So we're gonna come with a blowtorch and lead pipes, politically of course. And so really looking forward to having JD there as well. All right, fun for everybody, come on out if you can. Oh, I wanna tell you guys, speaking of which, people are coming, I just got a note on this, from North Dakota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, a very large group coming in from Kansas City. This rally is no joke, man. It's gonna be a TYT bonanza. And I'm telling you, we're gonna try to change the path of the presidential race, the country, and policy in this country. And I think you guys could be an absolutely critical part of it. I've got another note here that someone else is flying in for the event and bringing their 11-year-old kid with them as well. So it's almost like a Woodstock for this revolution. So I hope I see you guys there in Iowa. It's going to be fantastic.
All right, ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Stephanie Jones found that her son had died after he was discovered hanging from an electrical tower on April 14th of 2011. She's from South Bend, Indiana, and her son's death was immediately ruled a suicide, even though there is some evidence to indicate that that is not necessarily true. TYT Investigates has looked into this story and found that there are all sorts of questionable things that were done by authorities in South Bend, Indiana. And even though Stephanie Jones asked Pete Buttigieg to please help her, to please look into her son's death, her requests went ignored, and she feels that no one has any interest in helping her or listening to her story. But now TYT Investigates has uncovered the details of this story, and we're gonna share them with you today. Now first, I wanna just quickly note all of the different issues that were discovered in the son's death. First off, the coroner had ruled that it was a suicide on the scene. The issue is that the coroner had absolutely no medical training whatsoever. Okay. Also, there was no forensic examination of the scene or of the body. There was also the fact that the body was cremated before an autopsy could be done. There was also the fact that Jones was not allowed to see the scene where her son was found hanging, and Jones was asked to sign a bill for cremation minutes after her son's body, after she had seen her son's body. So she had seen her son's body for the first time, and minutes later, she was asked to sign the bill for cremation. And finally, the classmates of her son alleged that her son had an issue with a white male in the school who had threatened him, who had used racial slurs against him, and again had threatened to cause harm to him. So these are all points that you'll see throughout the story, but I want to give you more of what was going on, contextualize it for you. According to Jeff Harrell, who wrote for TYT Investigates, Stephanie Jones, a black woman in South Bend, sat at her dining room table in front of her son's remains and tearfully wondered why nobody, including Mayor Pete Buttigieg, ever agreed to investigate the death of her 16-year-old son. She believes he was murdered, and she's not alone in thinking that. So when it comes to the coroner, Coroner Chuck Hurley certified it as a suicide, listing the time of death as 1:50 p.m., 8 minutes after the 911 call. The official cause of death was asphyxiation by hanging, okay? Now, I wanna give you some more details, but Jake, do you wanna jump in before I do that?
Yeah, I wanna be clear about one thing. Buttigieg was not mayor when the incident happened. He became mayor later, and then Jones, the mom, asked him for help. And they were at a meeting together where they were discussing town business. It's called the South Bend Common Council. That's the city's legislative body, and that was in the summer of 2012. And the minutes we acquired at TYT, and they do show that Buttigieg was there. And Jones went up and talked to him, and he gave her a card, and he said, "Call me, and I'll follow up on this." And she said every time that she called Buttigieg, she would only get the secretary. She would never be passed on to the mayor, and there was never any return calls. So it's about the aftermath of the investigation. And there is one other connection to Buttigieg that is potentially important. So Chuck Hurley, who was the coroner, even though he has no medical experience in that regard, as Anna told you earlier in the beginning of the story, that's already strange, but I don't know if that happens in small towns across the country. But
it actually does. It's funny.
Yeah.
It's not funny, but it's interesting that this story was just published by TYT Investigates, because over the weekend, John Oliver had done a lengthy piece on how coroners in a lot of cities throughout the country do not have medical training and actually are underfunded.
Yeah, but the connection to Buttigieg is that the mom is asking Buttigieg to look into Chuck Hurley and how he declared it an immediate suicide. But at the time, Buttigieg had demoted the police chief, who was the first African-American police chief of South Bend, Indiana. We covered that story earlier in the Young Turks, and TYT Investigates did some great reporting on it. You can read that at tyt.com. Anyway, he had demoted the black police chief, and he had put in his place as interim police chief, Chuck Hurley. So he would have to open an investigation on the guy he just named as interim police chief. Could that explain why there was no call back to the mom?
Possibly.
It's certainly relevant, let's put it that way.
Also, I want to just quickly address an uncomfortable part of the story, which is the teen's name, Jihad Vasquez. So he's a Christian and his absentee father had named him. So he has nothing to do with jihad, even though that is his first name. I just want to get that out of the way.
Yeah, well, actually the fact that he's a devout Christian plays into the story later because he carries a Bible with him all the time. And several people, including his friend and family members, said he would never commit suicide. He thought people who committed suicide couldn't get into heaven. So they were perplexed when they found out, according to the authorities, that he had committed suicide out of the blue. They thought that was very unlike him. Now, again, whether that's true, of course, is very hard to determine now, but it's problematic that they did not do an autopsy, and it's problematic that they didn't look into the fight where he was called a racial slur right before this incident happened.
So there were some red flags when it came to the discovery of his body, what was missing when they discovered him, and his mother lists all the different items that were missing from the scene. So she says his school ID was missing, his wallet with $20 in cash and a ring were also missing. Most of that sheet was missing, meaning the sheet that he had taken with him to his friend's house. He was going to his friend's house for a sleepover, and he had taken a sheet from his home for the sleepover. When authorities found him, he was hanging with that sheet wrapped around his neck, and apparently only about 20% of the sheet was there. So where was the other 80% of the sheet? The mother wanted to know that. He also had an iPod with Tupac Shakur and stuff on it that was missing. So all these different items that are valuable were missing.
So look, guys, again, I don't know how small towns operate, and I don't know if the cops are super busy or they just like to be dispensed with this stuff right away. But it's definitely shoddy police work to not ask, hey, did he get into a confrontation? And one piece of evidence would be, is there anything missing from his backpack, the backpack that they found? If you find out that money's missing, his wallet is missing, his ring, an iPod, what's the first thing you think of? Any rational person thinks, well, somebody took that stuff. Maybe they took it after they saw that his body was hanging. Maybe they took it well before and then he committed suicide. But is it relevant that somebody might have taken it and then committed an act of violence on him? Of course it is.
Right.
Of course it is. And that might lead you to do a more thorough investigation, including an autopsy, instead of cremating him immediately.
Yeah, and
which is what they did.
And I just want to give some extra information. You mentioned it's a small town. There are 100,000 people in South Bend. It is, by comparison, relatively speaking, a small town. And just to give you some more details about possible red flags that the investigator should have looked into. Jihad's last day at Penn High School had ended with him getting a 4-day suspension after fighting with a student who took his iPhone. During the fight, his friend Blake says the other student, a white male, threatened retaliation and slurred Jihad verbally with the N-word. Also, Jihad's sister, Charlene, referred to a friend of his who had mentioned specific details about where his body was located before the police discovered the body. The students at Penn High School, Jihad's classmates, knew that Jihad was dead before my mother was notified. They believe that Jihad was put there to make it look like a suicide, but it's not. This is according to a letter, again, that Charlene had written, and Stephanie Jones, the mother, read out loud to authorities in South Bend. So
I want to caution that I don't want our audience to jump to conclusions either, right? I wish they'd done a better investigation. I wish the mayor at the time had done it, and then Buttigieg had followed up when the mom asked him to. But we don't know if all the rumors that went around about people knowing about it ahead of time are true or not true. That's what you would want the cops to investigate when you have a mysterious death out of nowhere in a situation like this. There's one other piece to this mystery. Our reporter actually got to see a photo that has not been released that showed Jihad's body. And the original police report said that he was hanging 10 feet off the air. But in the picture-
Off the ground.
Off the ground, I should say, I'm sorry. But in the picture, his feet were flat on the ground and his knees bent. Now, there could be a very logical explanation for that. Maybe they lowered him and then took the picture. We don't know for sure. But it does not match what's in the police report. It's another thing that certainly was worthy of an investigation. I don't know if they can go back and do the investigation now. Of course, the number one problem is that they immediately cremated him.
Right, and let me give you some details about that, because this is also, in my opinion, a very problematic part of the story. So remember, his body was found April 14th, 2011. Now let's go to graphic 19. The death certificate indicating that Jihad was cremated was filed April 15th, the day after he was found. But Indiana state law requires that bodies be held 48 hours before cremation. So Stephanie Jones, the mother, is saying that she felt pressured to sign a bill for cremation. There's also an issue there when it comes to the different places that bodies are sent after they, are dead. There is one funeral home that most people will send their, bodies to, and then there's one that specifically the Black community in South Bend sends the bodies to. And the reason why they do that is because they just feel safer, they feel like the treatment is fairer there. And so she's very much concerned that everything just moved so quickly and that she was pressured and coerced, she used the word coerced, into signing the bill for cremation at this particular home, and that his body was cremated before she even had a chance to, think about an autopsy, think about a more thorough investigation.
Yeah, and I want to be clear there. It's not a matter of, they sent him to the white funeral parlor instead of the black one. No, their concern is, why did they send him to the one that African Americans don't normally go to? It could have been not even a mistake. Somebody might not have known. It's not a big deal in that regard if nothing is amiss. But in this case, the guy who runs that funeral parlor is a guy named Hanley. And Hanley is the one that the mom says coerced her into cremating her son immediately. Hanley is a retired South Bend police officer who had 32 years of service in the police department, and he has very strong ties to the local police. Now, that might mean nothing, or it might mean that the cops sent the body to a guy that they know and trust, who then wanted to hurry the cremation along. But I swear to you that I'm not jumping to conclusions, and again, I'm asking you for the second time not to, because it might have been incredibly normal that somebody checks off, hey, people normally go to Hanley's for a funeral, and they send them to Hanley. So, but you can never know any of these things unless you look at it. And with the money stolen and all the other things stolen, and the fight right beforehand where he's called a racial slur, it's really unfortunate that no one ever looked into it originally, and they seem to have hurried up and just said it. And the most common reason normally is laziness. And by the way, disregard. If that was the mayor's son hanging, do you think that they would have wrapped it up immediately?
No.
Do you think they would not have done an autopsy? Do you think they would have cremated the body in 24 hours? Now, you all know the answer to that. But if it's an African American boy, their best case scenario is we didn't really care that much.
I just want to note that the reporter for this story was interviewed by John Idarola on the damage report. So please make sure you check that out and check out his show overall. It's a really good show. All right, we gotta move on.
Yeah, look, last thing on this, sorry. So the last part of the story is apparently before Jihad died, he said that he was worried that he had no freedom walking on the white man's ground because of how he was treated after the fight. And he apparently told his mom, I'm still a black man with no freedom. Everybody always gets their way. Who has a voice for me? And she said, I have a voice for you. And so the fact that she couldn't get anyone to pay attention to the case is haunting her to this day. And she's still trying to be that voice for him. So even if there's no presidential candidate involved here, most of the time when there's injustice done in little parts of America that nobody's paying attention to, nobody ever gets justice. And so this would still be an incredibly important case if there was no one famous involved. And so I hope that someone eventually gets Jones some degree of justice and follow through that she's looking for.
All right, we'll be right back.